Lynne Brazg. I'm a senior at Northwest Yeshiva High School. So I'm attending college next year, hopefully a four-year university. In my spare time, well, I'm president of Yeshiva. I'm also president of the Friendship Circle. I teach at Sunday school here at the JCC, Spartak Religious School. I'm varsity boys team manager, and the list of extracurriculars goes on and on for me. However, I do feel very well prepared to attend college next year, and I'm looking forward to it.
My name's Ingham, and I'm the father of a 2-year-old. And the reason I'm on this panel is I told one of the organizers that I'd seen this movie, and it explained why I felt stressed out applying to preschool. And that is my qualification here. And the movie really brought for me a lot of questions about what I was buying into. And it wasn't a conscious choice. It was the culture, it was what I had been through, my own experience, and all of these things were driving me to feel anxious about preschool. Something is wrong, because if I'm anxious, my son will be anxious, and I'm beginning to question what it's all about. So I'm here simply to represent the view of someone who's going to be a participant in this system, and I'm not really liking what I see.
Hi, I'm Lynne Brazg, and I'm education editor of ParentMap, and I'm also the author of a book called Beyond Smart, Boosting Your Child's Social, Emotional, and Academic Potential. And I also do some work with King TV. I'm an on-air parenting expert. And what struck me, a lot of things struck me about this film, but there was almost no mention, I think somebody ran this past everyone at once, about social emotional development and how crucial that is to every kind of education of our kids, and how in fact you can't really have the academics go well without the social and emotional components. And I'd like to see a whole new film on that. And maybe it's because that is not emphasized enough right now in our schools, but hopefully we'll talk more about that.
My name is Lynne Brazg, and I work as a middle school counselor in Bellevue, and I'm also a mother of 3. And I'd like to talk to the film first because it was so impactful, and yes, it's true. It is true. We do not stop to learn or learn to stop. And adding to the social emotional piece, I think the spiritual, we create vacuums for these kids, and then when they fail, they feel completely demoralized. What happened to the process? And why are we all in it? I see it at school, the educators, the teachers, all of us parents. I've been there. I've raised 3 kids on Mercer Island. Why? We need to redefine the paradigm, and it's a dominant paradigm. And yes, it addressed this documentary, particularly addressed upper middle class and middle class, but you know, there's a whole other section of the population that our schools don't address at all. We meet kids where they are not, and not where they are. So I just think that we should all make a pledge to try and do something, and maybe it first starts at home, to really step back and think, what are we doing?
So I think Lynn brings up a great thing. I don't know if everybody actually got the card, but I think, you know, there's a certain sense of it's overwhelming, the important issues that were raised in this movie, from suicide to, not to say it's uncomplicated, but picking a preschool. But the extremes of what is presented is tremendous. And I think one of the things that's unique about Washington State is being a leader actually in social emotional learning and early learning. The phrase 10 years ago when Washington State really got active in early learning, that has now become frequently heard everywhere you go. Parents are our child's first and most important teacher. So take a moment. Think about, in reaction to this movie, what that means. What is the one thing that you could possibly do? Because at the end of the day, we all hope we could change a system or change how school is run or the curriculum in the classroom. And it's moving mountains, and not that we shouldn't work on it, But what can we do individually, like go home and do differently a little bit that will make you feel like I heard what Lynne said?
And haven't really felt the pressure is basically from time managing. And I think it's important that you either ask your child's teacher like what type of homework they're going to get for the week, or just kind of map out their week, because when the child comes home and has so much homework that night, you can't just get it all done. They will be up till 1 in the morning. You know, I've had my fair share of nights where you're just up till so late doing homework, and it is ridiculous. But now, as a senior, I've learned how to time manage myself. I've learned how to prioritize and just get things done at the right time, and it's really worked out well for me.
And you know, what she said is, it's really so telling, because when she talks about passion, you notice when she said her passion, it wasn't her parents' passion. And I think that's where a lot of us fall down, is that we have a vision of who we want our kids to be, and it can be based on our own lives, it can be based on our parents' lives, it can be based on a TV show or a neighbor, and maybe we want them to be successful in a sport or a particular musical instrument. And when they're very young, you know, most of us do try and introduce our kids to many, many things, but I think the trick is to let them make that decision later on what it is they like, whether it's an activity or a sport or music or none of the above, or math. My son loved science and math. That was him. That's nothing I'm good at. I couldn't even help him. But he pursued that because he was passionate about it, and I think that says a lot about you and probably the kind of parenting you had, the fact that you were able to kind of follow your own dreams. And the other thing that struck me a lot about this movie is the emphasis on, you know, the fact that these kids were all driven to go to, really it had to be like 20 schools in the country. I mean, do you know there are hundreds of colleges that are, maybe they're competitive, maybe they're not, but a lot of them, many students can actually get into, and they're very, very good colleges. And this focus on, and whether that's reality or not, I don't know, or certainly the movie focused on the fact that everybody was trying for the same 20 schools. It doesn't even make logical sense when there are so many schools that are great, and as we know, and it was pointed out in the movie, success, once you graduate from whatever school people don't really, you know, meet you, and that's not the first thing out of their mouths, and when you get a job, it doesn't really, it's not defined by where you went to school. So how did that happen?
I will share with you one thing, that the teachers are on board with this race to nowhere, and there are some teachers, few minority, who will stand up for their beliefs and will not go with that pacing guide, and don't believe that rigor is attained by accelerating the pace, and they hold true to it. And guess what? Those teachers, administrators will come into their classes and say, what's your secret? And it's because they've slowed down and they're looking at the kids they're teaching. So if we all try to do that in some way.
One thing that, as a father, I'm trying to do is recognize when I feel that my role is to be a product development manager for my son, as if I'm supposed to get him to a certain high school that's prestigious and powerful and connected. And in order to get him to that high school, he has to go to the right middle school. And to get him to that middle school, he has to go to the right grade school. And he better do well. And then the right grade school, if I really want him to get into hot grade school, he better go to that grade school's preschool. And suddenly, what am I doing? What am I doing? What is this really about? And I've let go of the truth that I'm not developing him. I need to support his own discovery. He's a discovery machine. He's got all this learning in him. He wants to learn, but it has to be the whole child. It has to be his body, his mind, his spirit. And if he's not sleeping, and if I'm worried about where he's going to go and not where he is, then I'm not sharing the isness with him, and I'm missing the point. So for me, it's simply asking, what is education, what is life about as a parent? It's not about skill acquisition. Skill acquisition is great, but that's not what life is about.
All of us, and this isn't just the schools, need to redefine our concept of success. And then that really is, I think, the heart of a lot of this. How do we define success? Is it just happiness? Probably not. You want your kids to be productive, contributing members of society in addition to being happy, I'm guessing. But the component of, is it important that they make a lot of money? That's what the film said. It's hard to believe that most of us think that way, but I think that's the first thing that we need to do is really come up with a definition for ourselves and for our kids and for our culture. What really is success? What's a successful person?
My recommendation would be take it to the head of school. This is elevating thought leadership in a school about intelligence and data that is now shown to have impact. And so in some ways it's like you're motivated for your own child, but it might get everybody further if they act on behalf in the institution of here's what we've learned from this movie and from work that's being published on the subject.
The other thing that comes to mind for me is every kid is different, and they're different every day. And so, like Juliana thrives in an environment where she's got a lot going on, and it's wonderful. And I was that kind of kid too. I was a high-achieving kid in a lot of different areas, but not every kid. But I wasn't in middle school. I nearly cracked. That was just my experience. So yeah, I think it's keeping an eye on the mind, the body, and the spirit, and how are those things working for my kid right now? Am I attuned to him right now and what he needs right now? And there's no one-size-fits-all answer to that, and that's the hard work. Not getting him into the right school, but knowing what the right life experience is, I think.
I'd just like to add one thing about the homework. I think homework can be intentional, and I think that sometimes there is a purpose for homework when it's very well thought about. But there's also grades that are assigned to homework that kids can really, especially in high school, they can just do homework and pass the class, and they can just cheat from whoever is doing it. But I think we all landing on the homework because that's something tangible that we can try and fix and take out of the system. But I think I'd like to challenge us all to think in the bigger picture of how we all are in this fast train to nowhere, the teachers as well, and how do we make that step out of it with or without landing on the homework. But there's a really big picture out there of culture and our values.
So, first of all, thank you so much. Thanks to the community of mindful parents, and thank you to the JCC. This was great, and really we want to keep the discussion going. So, grab a card, write a thought, leave it with us, and thank you also to the panelists. And